Okay. Sir, you can start now.
Dr. Otta, you can start.
Yes, hello and good afternoon to all. So this webinar we are arranging in connection with these three occasions. And as you know that antimicrobial resistance week is continuing this week, which started from 18th and it will continue till 24th. And also, as you know, the country is celebrating 75 years of Independence Day, and in that connection, ICAR is also organizing several programs. And under Fisheries Division, we have developed several themes, and one of the theme is campaign on antimicrobial resistance on fish, so which is from 22nd to 24th. And apart from that, yesterday you had also World Fisheries Day. So all these three occasions, the antimicrobial resistance is very much connected, and which is aimed towards development of sustainable fisheries. So before we go to the main topic, I will request Dr. M. Purnima, Principal Scientist, Aquatic Animal Health Division, to welcome one and all. Madam, unmute. Madam, unmute.
Madam, unmute.
Unmute, madam.
Good afternoon to everybody. So antibiotics are very powerful drugs. We all know that they are used to treat the bacterial infections. And first, the broad spectrum antibiotic was discovered by Alexander Fleming, who won the Nobel Prize for the same. But because of this effective and ease of availability, it has led to the misuse, and that has led to the abuse of the antibiotics. Surprisingly, it is to note that the antibiotic resistance was a note was given by the Fleming himself in his Nobel Prize winning speech. He made warning about the dangers of misusing penicillin as caution for future generations. The forewarning words of his speech are as follows. It is not difficult to make microbes resistant to penicillin in the laboratory by exposing them to concentration not sufficient to kill them, but the same thing has occasionally happened in the body. The time may come when penicillin can be brought by anyone in the shops. Then there is danger that the ignorant man may easily underdose himself, and by exposing his microbes to non-lethal quantities of the drug, make them resistant. So his warning prediction is regarded as a present-day reality. Currently, AMR is one of the biggest threats to global health, food security, and development. A growing list of infections which are becoming harder and sometimes impossible to treat as antibiotics become less effective. Thus, we are heading for a post-antibiotic area in which common infections and minor injuries can once again kill. AMR is a complex problem, and it needs coordinated action for One Health approach to find lasting solutions. And today we have with us Dr. G. Ganga, Associate Professor, Sri Ayyappa College, University of Kerala, with us to share her views on AMR issues that are emerging and spreading globally and threatening effective treatment of common infectious diseases. I am pleased to invite Dr. Ganga Madam to this digital event. World Health Organization has classified antimicrobial resistance as globally widespread serious threat, and confronting antibiotic resistance is a high priority. Global Action Plan on Antimicrobial Resistance to ensure prevention and treatment of infectious diseases with safe and effective medicine was initiated by World Health Assembly in May 2015. Since then, World Antimicrobial Awareness Week as a global campaign held annually during 18 to 24th November with an aim to increase awareness of antimicrobial resistance worldwide and to encourage best practices among the general public, health workers, and policy makers to avoid further emergence and spread of drug resistant infection with the slogan Antimicrobials Handled with Care. In this context, as part of this global event, under the guidance and support of Dr. K.P. Jitendran, Director CBOR, Today's program on antimicrobial resistance, a global threat, is being organized. I also wish to mention that under his guidance, currently 2 project teams are working on addressing the issues related to antimicrobial resistance in brackish water aquaculture. It's my privilege to invite Dr. K.P. Jitendra Sir, Director, to this webinar. The professional bonding, compassion, spirit of cooperation of Siva fraternity is the strength in achieving our set national goals as one team. It's my pleasure to invite HODs, SICs, co-scientists, technical officers, administration and finance staff members, scholars, and all registered participants from various geographical places to this online event. I once again invite one and all to this program. Thank you.
Thank you, madam. So as madam has already pointed out, so our director, Dr. K.P. Jitendran sir, he has always been encouraging for all such programs. So I invite sir to deliver his initial remarks.
Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, Dr. Ganga, chief guest of today's function, and all my SICs, heads of the divisions, colleagues, and those who are participating in this program online and offline. And once again, good afternoon, everybody. As you know that this is a part of our celebration of the ICR program, Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, is celebrating the 75th year of independence. We have got chartered a very, very elaborate program, which is consisting almost for 1 year. And this happened to be that one of the national campaign, which is titled as Antimicrobial Resistance. And this is coinciding with the Antimicrobial Resistance Week, which has a campaign from 18 onwards. And ICR has got a very elaborate program. Almost all the institutions, for that matter, whether it is agriculture science or veterinary science or aquaculture fisheries institute, all are participating, plus all other KVKs and all the institutions and organizations participating in this event. And only difference is that it is spanning over a few days. And as you all know that we have initiated this program about 2 weeks with a small program. In that Dr. Karnasagar's lecture was there as a first event. And now 18 onwards, most of the institute, yesterday there was a program by NBFGR, even today by SIBA, tomorrow by SIFT. There is a very elaborate program in pipeline right now. As you know that we heard, I can see in the panelists, all are microbiologists in this group, except me in this panel. And so I'll be speaking very little about this antimicrobial resistance, because I'm not the authority to speak on this topic. Even then, I'll just say that antibiotics as such is a burden for the aquaculture. Though use of antibiotics in aquaculture is very minimal. As you know that aquaculture, we have got very, very few drugs and chemicals which can be used in the sector. People may be using in an unauthorized way a limited number or quantity. But even then, what was told by Karnasagar in the first lecture, it is in my mind. He was telling that almost 73.7% of the usage is from veterinary field and 20.5% from the human field, and only 5.7% of the usage is really from the aquaculture. But if you see the burden, all the things are leached out finally to water bodies, and where this burden of carrying this burden is for the people who are dealing with water. It is mainly the fisheries scientists and fisheries sector as a whole. And in proportion to this thing again, that since aquaculture is the most prominent activity in Asian countries, again attributed that Asian countries are using the maximum antibiotics or chemicals related to water bodies. And so in this context, China is accused of very high usage, followed by India. That is what the literature and the statistics says. In a similar way, here again, this I remember that Ganasakar sir was also telling that in this there are intrinsic, even this antibiotic resistance happened before the human civilization itself. It is very much there in the even pathogenic or non-pathogenic organisms, even sea bottom, and far away from the human civilization side also. So it is basically a natural phenomenon that was told. I hope Dr. Ganga, though she is a new face to me, and I never knew that is a speaker or a new figure in this area in Sri Ayyappa College. And I welcome Dr. Ganga also for this. I am sure that she will be able to throw some more lights and to our young group. And I wish all the best to the people participated in this one for organizing this thing, the event. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, very much. And so coming back to today's program, the webinar. So as you all know, the World Antimicrobial Awareness Week. In this connection, the theme of this year is spread awareness and stop resistance. So in that connection, we have to spread more and more awareness program, because this is this AMR is not no more a localized problem. It's a global threat. So how that is a global threat, we'll learn from our speaker, Dr. Gangaji. So before she starts, I'll just give a brief introduction about the speaker. So she's from Sri Ayyappa College, Ermalikara, under the University of Kerala. She did her MSc in Applied Microbiology from University of Madras and PhD in Biotechnology from ICAR CTCRI in Trivandrum. And she did her postdoctoral research at Center for Genomics and Gene Technology under University of Kerala. She has more than 10 years of teaching experience, and she's teaching the PG and UG students and covering the subjects of virology, microbiology, biotechnology, and molecular biology and immunology. She has also more than 20 years of research experience, and she has guided more than 20 MSc and MPhil students and also some PhD students. She has more than 15 publications to her credit, and she has edited 2 books and several book chapters. To her credit, she has also several awards, and to list the latest one is Young Scientist Award from Nature Science Foundation. In just a few days back, she received it, and she has been also handling several external funded projects. So with that, I'm sure she is also considered a very popular teacher among the students. So if some college students have joined this program, definitely they will be benefited. So this program is mainly for the college students to get awareness about the antimicrobial resistance. So now with that background, I request Dr. Gangaji to deliver her talk.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, one and all. First of all, I profusely thank Dr. K.P. Jitendranath, Director, SIBA, ICR for organizing an Awareness Week program 2021 against the AMR. It's indeed a needful talk for the hour. And I also congratulate all the organizers for the past few weeks of programs. I congratulate Dr. Purnima, Dr. K.V. Patil, Dr. Subhendu Kumar Otta for organizing such an wonderful events. I also thank all the staff members of SIBA for organizing such AMR programs. So with all this, I thank Dr. Subhendu Kumar Otta for inviting me for today's sessions. Now let me get into the topic. Today's topic of our discussion is antimicrobial resistance, a global threat. So this is our topic of presentation, this antimicrobial drug resistance, a global threat. As you all know, we are in the AMR week, and as Dr. Subhendu Kumar Otta also already mentioned, this year's theme is spread awareness and stop resistance. So as we all know, we are in the COVID, we are in the midst of COVID, and we are in the glitch of that. We are not fully recovered, especially the state like me where I am sitting. We are half. Yesterday also the death toll was around 49, and 7,000 people are again getting positive today as per today's report. And we cannot separate antimicrobial resistance from COVID-19 because it's a dual health threat now we are facing. COVID pandemic is easily we are getting rid of the COVID pandemic very soon, but the antimicrobial resistance will persist. That's what the WHO also says. So mainly my topic of today's session is not strictly related to the aquaculture alone, but it's in general because antimicrobial resistance is a global threat nowadays, and it's continued to be also. So we know that throughout our history, we were having a battle between the microorganisms and us. So the multitude of microorganisms that cause infection and disease, starting from the Antonian plague, bubonic death plague, and now we are reaching into the COVID-19. So whatsoever the scenario, the battle between human beings and organisms are still in continuing. So today's my topic is based on 3 different topics. Exactly what is antimicrobial resistance. A little bit was explained by Dr. Purnima in her introductory remarks, and how resistance is developed, and what is really a global threat is, whether it is a real threat or not, in what way it is, and what all the management strategy we can come across with that. So as we all know, the antimicrobials, on the whole, it's a terminology, either it's for against bacteria, against for this virus, against for fungus or any parasites. It's all together, we call it as a term called the antimicrobials. So when it comes to the MR, it's one of the serious public health threat of the 21st century. And the resistance to antimicrobial agents has become a major source of morbidity and mortality worldwide. Even in the case of livestock, if it is taken the human beings, if it is the aquaculture, wherever it is the final ultimate resistance of antimicrobial agent is a major cause of infections. And it's estimated around 700,000 to 750,000 people are dying every year because of that, and it's alarmingly going to be increased in later years also. So when it comes to the antimicrobial resistance, according to WHO, what's exactly an antimicrobial resistance is? Any drugs, any microorganism that cannot be killed by a sufficient concentration, which was being killed usually, or it is fall into the minimum inhibitory concentration, we call it as antimicrobial resistance. So look at this picture, like as we are normal or in any organisms, it can be easily be killed by applying an antibiotic. But when it's reversed back to a mutant level, that it can overcome this antibiotic resistance, it continue to reproduce, and it will be persist in that, and that can overcome the effect of these antibiotics. This Dr. Purnima ma'am has already mentioned about the remarkable discovery of Alexander Fleming. It was a drastic change has taken in the history of medicines when it was the wonder drug penicillin was discovered. There were 3 scientists, Howard Florey, Ernest Chain, and Alexander Fleming. They were contributed with contributed a lot for this medicines in terms of the production of antibiotics, and Alexander Fleming has got his Nobel Prize. So you all know a little bit of history. There's a little bit story behind it. Like when the Alexander Fleming has gone for a vacation, known as a December vacation, he was just forcefully kept his plate on his laboratory, and while he's coming back, he could able to see that there was his Staphylococcus aureus was inhibited by some fungus. And finally, he could able to observe that some extra metabolites, which is secondary metabolites, which is produced by fungus, and his term was penicillium, and that was the wonder drug. Our penicillin was discovered. Look at the golden era of antibiotic. So this golden era of antibiotics started from 1930, and that was soon after the penicillin was discovered. And after that, from 1930 to 1970, we call it as the golden era of antibiotics. So many of drug discoveries, starting from sulfonamide, gramicidin, penicillin, streptomycin, bacitracin, and neomycin. All the drugs which we are using it today was discovered all these years, starting from the 1940s to 1960s. Later, if you see, the scenario was little bit reduced. Right now, it is very comes to narrow. So the production of drug is antibiotics. Naturally, it is narrowed down. So due to certain factors, because could be one of the factors that the antibiotic resistance has inhibited the development and the industrial revolution in the case of antibiotic drug development. So these are the major antibiotics which we are synthesizing and using it today. Look at that. It is not recent. Nothing is there in the recent ones. It's already been discovered, is reused again and again in different forms. Starting from sulfonamides to carbamine, monogalactamines, daptomycin, tetracycline, cephalosporin. All these are the newly, all discovered in the age of 1937 to 1992, up to 1992. So, as Dr. Purnima has already mentioned about that, when he was in his Nobel laureate lecturer, when our Alexander Fleming was delivering the lecture soon after he got his Nobel Prize, he was warned us about the dangerous misusing of the penicillin. And it's not only for the penicillin, it is applicable for almost all antibiotics. And she has already told about the speech. I'm not going to repeat it again. So this was the warning sign he was giving during the year of 1945 itself, which is when ignorant man can easily be underdose himself, and exposing these microbes to a non-lethal quantity, the drug make them resistant. That was his comment on his own drug. So drug resistance infection leads to mortality and morbidity. From 7,000, it leads to around 700 deaths worldwide annually. So, and in that, US and Europe is contributing about 50,000. That much is lethal morbidity and lethality due to these infections. So, death attribute when compared to the other cause of death like tetanus, road traffic incidents, measles, diarrheal disease, diabetics, cholera, cancer, the AMR is going to be the leader one in the topmost one when it reaches to 2050. That much alarming the situation is going to be when it reaches to 2050. So a study recently conducted in Australia says that every 1 in 5 minutes, E. coli bacteremia is getting resistant to antimicrobial, especially fluoroquinols resistance E. coli are coming up. So that is 5% increase. Every 1 in every 5 minutes is getting resistant. So, of course, we cannot say that the modern medicines depend totally on effective antibiotics, but the antibiotic resistance threatens, and we are thinking that we might return back to the pre-antibiotic era. This could be worse than the pre-antibiotic era. As we know, as I mentioned about the bubonic plague and all, once before getting into the infections, the people were just without having any antibiotic, without having any drug, people were just dying. So this could be the scenario, can revert back anytime when this alarming situation going to be continued. And in Europe itself, it's around 25,000 patients are getting infected. And I know that the death toll, the hospital stay, it's costing a lot. It's losses of around economic loss of 1.5 billion euro every year. And the global threat is this, like, as I said, by 2050, it's going to be 10 millions, but alarmingly, our GDP rate comes down from 3.5 to 2 by that time, and it's costing around $100 of 100 trillions cost effectiveness due to the AMR in future years. So why it is considered to be so more impact on global economy? Because it is profoundly adverse effect on health consequences, not only in the aquaculture field or not only in the human individual, like human health hazardous on in livestock. So it is going to be a cumulative effect that is a worldwide adverse health consequences going to be faced. A long-term threat, no end in sight of unless fundamental changes are made. So it's going to be a long-term threat, not to be a short-term one. Even in the pandemic situations, we are just overcoming it, but this is not the case. We are going to be in a long-term threat. And economic implications is another matter of fact that this continues, it will largely affect our economy, and this is to an intersectoral issues. That's what I said. It is not only the economical matters, it's also health matters, and it's not only affected to the livestock or aquaculture or anything human being. It is in the environmental factor. So it is affecting in a multi-sectoral or intersectoral issues going to be affect to the persons. So you all might have heard about the UN agenda by, with the Sustainable Development Goals. That is, UN agenda is prepared for 2030. We have to reach this for the sustainability to reach. Now, we were talking about, Dr. Jiten sir was talking about that Sustainable Development Goals in aquaculture. So the 17 Sustainable Development Goals are needs to be attained to give a sustainable development in total. But the AMR is going to be threatening. It's a threat for around 17 out of 7 are in threat because of AMR, because clean water, sanitation, life below water, good health and well-being, life on land, no poverty, responsible production and consumption, climate action. These are the areas where the AMR is going to be hit. So that this is the 5 ways how the antibiotics resistance can disrupt our sustainable development goals. Like first is no poverty. The elevation of poverty is on one of the major target all nations, especially the developing country like India is facing. So we were just trying to get rid of the poverty, elevation of the poverty by 2030 by attain the sustainable development goals. But AMR is going to be an hindrance in that case. It's push additional 24 million people more to extreme poverty. That is going to be the estimated calculation by the UN. Then good health and well-being is another factor which is going to be affected. As we know, long-term hospital stay and people are infected with AMR, it's difficult to tackle them. So this is another place where the AMR is going to act. Next is reduced inequality. Haves and have-nots. There will be a huge difference between haves and have-nots because it's going to be hit the target of the economy, so that it will be haphazards problems will be there for inequality, in terms of inequality. Next is zero hunger. We all know, like livestock as a reason. I mean, in the last introductory remark, it was told about the livestock. Even the previous speaker also was in, Dr. Karnasagar also was mentioning about the livestock, how it is going to affect the livestock. So the production will be reduced for low-income countries. And the livestock, the getting of livestock, that is directly affecting the food consumptions. So when it is affecting the food consumption, obviously it is leading to the zero hunger problems. So next, the decent work and economic growth, as it is directly going to affect the GDPs. So it is definitely it is going to affect our work and economic growth of the country. So the global impact of antibiotic resistance is very concerned, and also said that it is very difficult to estimate how far it is going to be affected. It is difficult to estimate or predict, but still CDC, Center for Disease Control Prevention, they have made some estimated studies in major countries, developed countries like US. It is saying that more than 2 million people every year are affected with antibiotic resistant infection, and among that 23,000 are dying because of that. But in the case of Europe, it is the death is due to the most multi-drug resistant bacteria. That is another scenario which is going to be happening, and it's continuously happening Europe, because Staphylococcus aureus, the common organism like Staph aureus, Enterococcus faecalis, Streptococcus pneumoniae, Klebsiella pneumoniae, and Pseudomonas, etc., is going to be affected with the multi-drug-resistant bacteria. Then this MRSA is a multi-resistant organism, is another important factor for our neonatal intensities. I know every citizen for every country needs infants as a citizens for develop into youthful nations. So when it's affect to the neonatal intensive care units, it's going to be affect the death of the neonates. So major two species are in focus, like in Staphylococcus epidermis and Staphylococcus aureus for the infection in neonatal, that is multi-drug resistant bacteriums. Then another target of our hospital stay people are under cancer treatment, organ transplantation, hip transplantation, and intensive care, and pre-mortem pneumobobbies. These are those who are undergo the surgery, and those in the livestock and in the aquaculture field. Everywhere it is the antibiotic performance is going to fall. As if it is what categories, certain categories of antibiotics which are under threat which will enhance the AMR. So mortality and morbidity can be transferred from patients to patients, from patients to surroundings, patients to water, patients to the aquaculture dams, aquaculture streams, as well as into the poultry sessions, feed session, and into the surroundings. So CDC, according to CDC, the cumulative effect, like hospital stay, additional society cost. So society cost is another important factor, where that if there are the productivity of the nation depends on the society, citizens of the particular nations. If the death of the persons and long-term stay of the persons as in hospital will reduce the productivity of a particular nations, or the cumulative effect of estimated is around $35 million per year is going to be globally going to be spent for this AMR. So this was a recent study conducted by World Bank in 2017 against drug-resistant infections, and the World Bank study was later on taken in account by the World Health Organization, and they estimated that around USD of 9 billion a year can going to be, every year we have to at least $9 billion has to be spent for this, and we have to think whether can we afford so much for the spending of this AMR. So as I say, it is a social. So I just wanted to emphasize that the societal loss and manpower productivity, that is very important factor, and long-term hospital stay is another important factor to be taken into account. Then another factor which is going to be taken into consideration, that switching over of antibiotics. The first time antibiotic, that's called the first line antibiotics, were very not much expensive, but when you shifted to second line and third line of antibiotics, if it is the first line is not going to be work out, we are switching on to the second line and third line expensive antibiotics. Whether that can be affordable or not, that is also under question. So there was elevated cost of antibiotics in that terms, because the keep on switching of the antibiotics is not affordable to the every man of this or every citizens of the country. So there is an interplay between the agriculture as well as the productivity, because in livestock and agriculture feeds, and even in aquaculture feeds, the farmers are not well aware of the putting of antibiotics into the production of this livestock. So the use of antimicrobials, growth and production promotes in animals. So they think that it can be antimicrobial can promote the growth of animals, and there are a lot of applications are giving, because here the veterinarians, when we were in an introduction talk with the veterinarians before regarding this antimicrobial resistance in last year with regarding the ASPI club. So they were openly they were they have accepted us, and the fact that they are using the antimicrobial in feedstock of livestock. And regulation, overnight counter is another problem. So in US and all and even the other developed countries, over counter getting antibiotics is very less, but here it's also especially for livestock as well as for agriculture use, over counter antibiotics are available and they are drastically being used. And anthropological, socio-cultural, politics, and economical factors are the barriers of this good practice. So in order to limit the antimicrobial resistance, we need to have some good practices, but there are some hindrances like political and economical factors are behind the screen of this good limiting factor of good practices. So where all we use the antibiotics, just like the previous speaker has said, here also I'm just wanted to point out that main concentration of antibiotics is in, this is the estimated strategy from US in 1918. It says that the livestock is having the more consumption when compared to human being and agriculture crops and pets, etc. Aquaculture is very limited, that is 150,000 kg alone. Look at the other scenario in the case of livestock and human beings. So livestock is the maximum usage of antibiotics for the livestock. This may be a misinterpretation, and it is not directly affected the human beings, and it is not getting noticed, and it is getting into the livestock. And if it is putting in the livestock, it's definitely indirectly we are going to affect with the antibiotic resistant organism, because it's easily can be horizontally transferred from livestock to human beings. So since we are today talking on regard of the freshwater system, and in SIBA is mostly concentrating upon the freshwater, aquaculture resistance, I thought this is the key point to be mentioned, that aquaculture is the fastest growing food production sector worldwide, and the developing countries, that is the low income countries, are mostly depending on this aquaculture for their consumptions. So since it is depending on the consumptions, developing countries, more aquaculture, intense aquaculture is really in need. This for the since it is intensive aquaculture practices are going on, there's the chance of high risk disease burden. So there should be a research gap is required for the production and management of these diseases. So a demand of this aquaculture is increase the food production, and thereby it can enhances the there will be enhanced high risk of disease burden. So limit the disease burden. Generally, farmers are prone to applicable more amount of antibiotics into the water systems. So that can lead to potential drivers to resistance in poor fish farming practices, and in those cases, insufficiently labeled medicines, as Dr. Karnasagar was also already mentioned. So insufficient labeled medications are being practiced because it is over the counter, it can be available, and it is of low expense. It is available, so that insufficient good practices cannot be followed. And animal dropping as fertilizers. Nowadays, biofertilizer is another problem which is coming, because if the biofertilizer is contaminated with any contaminated bacteria which is having AMR, and it's directly putting into the aquaculture, as well as the surrounding areas where the algal culture has to be promoted, that is indirectly affecting the aquaculture systems. And a lack of awareness, that's what the AMR Awareness Week, we are here today, we are surrounding with the people, and we are giving some awareness, or getting some awareness because of that. So from pond to land, so from pond to our own plate, this is a scenario where the aquaculture exists. And here I should say that Madam has already explained, told about the One Health approach. Exactly here we need to tackle One Health approach, because when we look into the food chains, there is a separate food chain in the aquaculture system. So once an AMR or antibiotic resistant organism is getting infected, it's going to be transfers genetic genes, that is horizontal gene transfer method. It transmit the genes from one organism to another. It can also pass from protozoan to algae and large animals, even into the fishes. So these fishes are getting eaten up by the terrestrial animals like human beings and animals, and it's the food chain of the terrestrial system is also getting affected. So two-way food system, two-way food web is getting affected because of this the pond system, aquaculture resistance, which is occur in the, drug resistance occur in the aquaculture systems. So this is a multi-layered, multi-phase system. So in the world health approaches is, adequately required to tackle this problem. Another one matter is a paradigm shift for pathobiome pathogenesis. So generally there is an belief that one pathogen, one disease hypothesis. So there was always think that one pathogen is always cause one disease. So this is not the case when it comes to the biofilm formation or multi-drug resistant bacteria, when they comes cumulatively act against a particular target. And moreover, there are one organism can be multi-drug resistant. There are multiple organisms can be multi-drug resistant. So the pathobiome is very important in the case of interaction between pathogen to pathogen, pathogen to host interconnection, and also just like I said, the food web, like agriculture, food and health, the human beings, they are interconnected to each other. So the pathobiome, the enhancement of pathobiome due to the AMR is alarmingly high. So now WHO is prescribes one health strategy, like human, wildlife, pet, livestock ecosystems are interconnected. Once an antimicrobial adverse effect is happened to human beings, when the AMR is there with the human beings, naturally our aquatic system is getting infected through their defecation, through their urinals into the ecosystems of water. The fishes which are cultivating the waters, is getting indirectly the AMR into their body. And the wildlife, where if the water, soil and parasites are getting affected with AMR, naturally the wildlife is also getting affected. And another thing is the pet livestock farming. We are, intensively, that is, we are purposely putting the AMR antibiotics into the livestock feeding practices, so that the pets livestock farmings are getting infected with the AMR. So naturally, once this livestock is being ingested by the human beings, directly it is getting this and AMR into the human beings. So now we have to look how big the resistance has become, what big the problem has become, how it become resistance, how the organism become resistant to an antibiotics, and how natural and artificial induction of antibiotic resistance has occurred, and what are the management strategies we can adopt. So as I already mentioned, it is in 2050, it's going to be 10 million worldwide death, but it is going to be deadlier than cancer. That's what the recent studies says by which is mentioned by WHO. Look at the picture of Asia. It's when compared to all other countries, alarmingly, it is going to be get affected to Asia. That is 4,730,000, because our crowded, the population explosion, poverty, our pollution, everything matters, because Asia is one of the most populated continent. So it is going to be affected Asia more than the other countries. So this is the scenario which is now by 2020, we are into 2020, and now it's when it leads to 2030, it's 5 point, and when it's going to be 2040 to 14% increase. So this is the scenario when it is for the hospital terms. Tertiary hospitals are would be the major cause of nosocomial infections, then followed by secondary, primary, and other unknown factors. Thus, other unknown factors is through the environmental factors. So what are the possible factors which we are thinking? What are the possible factors which is responsible for antibiotics? That is, one factor is over prescription. So for now even for a flu, if it comes and viral infection comes, we have in a mindset that we need to have take antibiotics, possibly a viral infection. Many of the people are not aware of such things. So naturally they will go over the counter, get a paracetamol, get an antibiotics, whichever they want, a broad spectrum, come back and easily they get rid of the infections. But they are unknowingly, they are putting their life into threat. Next thing is patients not finishing their treatment. And even not in patients, I'm talking about even in livestock or even in aquaculture also. The farmers may put, if a fish is getting infection, farmer may put a few drugs, not in a correct regime of pattern of drugs. They put, but if 1 or 2 days, the infection may subside and they will stop it. And it is discontinuous of the regime, antibiotic regime. Discontinuation is another important factor. Then overdose. So whenever it is not required, also we also in human being itself is having the habit of taking antibiotics over again and again. Then poor infection control, like we all faced on 2020 when the first corona was hit. Many of our hospital was not having this adequate facility for a hospital care treatment and sanitation facility, etc. Then lack of hygiene, but which we learned, we have overcome because of this COVID-19. We learned how to wear mask, how to sanitize, all those things we are learned, but still we need to have more care on that. Now, other thing which is more point about this lack of new antibiotics being developed, and I told from after 1998, there's not much remarkable discovery has been coming in the field of antibiotics. So this is a cumulative effect, like a development and spread of antibiotic resistance, like a resistance from bacteria in the environment. What are the ways it can get into the environment through the livestock, through the long-term hospital stay, the discharge from the hospital, everything will come together and putting into the environment. And in the environment, it's getting high. The inflation of this antibiotics is getting alarmingly high, so that it is getting into the other environmental factors like air, air, soil, and water. And the soil flora is getting inhabited with the antibacterial organisms, and in the aquatic organisms, small microbes to the large animals are getting indirect way of antibiotic resistance is reaching up to them. So based on the studies, it says that researchers' resistance to antibiotics increase in faster pace than we control. As I tell, in recent studies reported by Australia, one in 85 minutes, antibiotic resistance is getting high. So some antibiotic resistance can pass from bacteria to bacterium, and resistant bacteria infection can pass from person to person. So this is an horizontal transfer from bacteria to bacteria, from bacteria to the host animal like human beings. So as we know, it can affect anyone, any age, and any country. So one of the incomplete, as I mentioned, the one factor is the incomplete treatment. Forget to take medication. That is another important fact which we all facing. Like we take for 2 days, then we'll forget ourselves, and slowly we thought it subsides, we'll just keep it. Again, the same infection come within 3 months, and again we are taking the same antibiotics. Possibly the same antibiotics won't work. We should go for shift to the second line, then should shift to the third line. This is the story which continues. So interrupt treatment is begun. First interrupt, we feel that we are feeling better, then we'll interrupt, stop the antibiotic taking for a while, and then it will be a problem. So it would be keep in that mind that we have to take in the full course. And inadequate contact with physicians. So that is another problem which when we were working in the COVID situation, we were put into the healthcare department. So that time we were facing like there is an inefficient contact between physician and the patients. There are two factors: the patients won't be, the physician won't be available right time. Another thing is the patients are not willing to come in contact with the physicians. Then irrational use of antibiotics like self-medications, like over the counter. That is another drawback in the places like India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and all facing, and which is not, I couldn't be able to find that thing in the US when US restrictions are very high. We cannot get any of the antibiotics over the counter. And misuse, that is without easily available in pharmacies without prescription. That is another misuse, what I want to say. Physician, that is not, generally they are not willing to give narrow spectrum of antibiotics. Most of the physicians, they give, appropriate narrow spectrum is very important, but they generally give broad spectrum of antibiotics that leads to AMR. So guidelines of skilled practitioners are very important in this scenario. And hospital like we have to avoid nosocomial infections. So like hand washing and changing of gloves, all adequate measures to be taken in the case of hospital case. Then another thing is the surveillance of antimicrobial antibiotic resistance is very less, especially in terms of environmental factors. So unknown susceptibility pattern of biotic acid encourages empirical selection of broad spectrum of antibodies. That's very important. That's why it is limiting factor is lack of equipments and the lack of personnel to do the susceptibility testing is another important lacuna behind this program. So next is crowding. So unhygienic conditions. We are eating from the unhygienic practices. So that is another thing. And the travel, I just want to explain you later, like poor quality of antibiotics. That some of the antibiotics are expired antibiotics, which and shared antibiotics. So that is, I have seen it in the scenario of pandemic also. In a person, a doctor may prescribe an antibiotic to a family, one single person. All the persons, respectively, whether they are getting infection or not, they started sharing with the other family communities, saying that can be prevented the infection, and they can, as a precautionary measure, they take the antibiotics. So that is totally should be avoided. And due to lack of quality of complaints and monitoring, that is another issues. Now comes to our poultry, cattle, pigs, etc. Growth and disease control. So they put even in the feedstock of Kerala, which we are available. So there are few tests done recently. There are the limit of antibiotics which is present in the feed of livestock was alarmingly high. So this is, I just wanted to, WHO has made this comment on this, how this One Health approaches has to be implemented. When what scenario, like suppose this is your aquaculture and this is the poultry culture, and the antimicrobials are just fed into the food producing animals. Though it is chicken, though it is another fish, whatever, maybe aquaculture, farm, poultry, anywhere it is being put as a feed. And slowly the drug-resistant organism is getting developed in their body, and it is going into the environment. It is spread to the environment. From the environment is getting into the food system, and this food system, it is ingested by the human being, and human being is getting sick. When he's getting sick, they are being admitted in the hospital, and nosocomial infection is started. It spread from one person to other persons, and it also spread to the healthcare professionals. So it's going as a chain of events, so that we need to have a One Health approaches. I just want to mention about the travel, because we nowadays, unlike the previous years, nowadays the travel between country to country is getting high, so that we are just grabbing, or we are taking our AMR with us. Just we have seen from China how it is COVID-19 has reached to many countries. That is, we know since it's a virus, we are testing and we are coming to know, but unknowingly we are another death, another slow killing organism is coming with us. This AMR is coming with us due to the travel. And the factors, environmental factors, huge population and overcrowding, that is a scenario which we are seeing in India, then that leads to rapid spread and poor sanitation. And community acquired resistance, that is another important fact to be screened, and it was to be found out. Then ineffective infection control programs, national, international travel, just how I just mentioned about that, and widespread use of antibiotic in animal husbandry and poultry and agriculture and aquaculture feeds. Fake drugs, that is alternative drugs is used instead of generic names where it must be different, or must be same, but it's the fake drugs, not a good company, or a substandard antibiotics may be used. Quality of drug is very important, and over-counter availability, the policy has to be made to avoid getting the over-counter antimicrobials. Then combination of dose combination is the fixing dose combination. The practices are just failing to fixing the combinations. That is another important factor. Then patient-related factors are like poverty, lack of education, self-medication, and this is not only patient-related factors. I just mentioned about the farmers-related factors also, and inadequate awareness programs are making them to put this kind of antibiotics into feeds, and especially in case of poultry industry. Other is the suggesting, the veterinarians as well as the doctors which are suggesting this particular antibiotics. So this inappropriate use of available drugs and overuse of antimicrobials in inadequate dosing. So inadequate dosing is another problem which is related to physician-related factors, like they do not know how to prescribe. So possibly not all the times. Many of the times their dosing will be different. Suppose we need only 500 micrograms. Sometimes so suppose we might leave 250 and it may overdose 500. So another 250 is going to be waste. It's going to be get in the urinals and into the aquaculture system, and so finally it getting into the into the surroundings, environments. So this is how there are different steps in which resistance, spread, exposure, and impact, which I have already explained. But this is what I wanted to say. This is an interconnect event. So look at this, and there is another remarkable thing which you have to see is like how the resistance are evolving when years goes together. During the time, as we know, like a remarkable discovery of our penicillin wonder drug, later around 10 years there was no problem, we were treating with that. But after the 10 years, slowly the beta-lactamase and this resistant organism, ampicillin resistant organism, penicillin resistant organism started arising. So like when it reaches to 1950, a lot of drugs have been identified, and slowly the antibiotic resistant organism like streptomycin, rifampicin has started reduced. But look at the scenario, like when it reaches to 2010, the ceftrolin, which was discovered in 2010, within no time, within a year or 6 months or together, it started, the antibiotic resistance started affecting on the ceftrolin. So alarmingly, the switching over of the gene regulation is happening in the body of bacteria, so that it will limit the uptake of antibiotics, or it will somehow overcome or the effect of antibiotics by producing antibiotic resistance. So there was a study conducted for 53 nations. Now shows that this is the pink color, this is a purple color. So this is a beta lactamase. As you can see, almost all countries you can see the beta lactamase resistance in but in a range of could be different, but it's almost all country we can see. Similarly, the combination of sulfonamide with the sulfonamide combinations, these also it is in Eastern Europe it was very less, but when compared to the other other countries like Africa is also very less. Mostly all other countries is having resistant to this sulfonamides. So, but the beta lactamase resistant penicillin can be seen in almost all countries. So, and even this carbamine. Carbamine is another main problem in India nowadays. India is facing. So, carbamine resistant organism is also evolving. As we all know, we all studied this mode of action of antibiotics, but I just wanted to have a glimpse before telling into the action of, microbial resistant action. So we all know the mainly two targets of antibiotics are there. One is cell wall inhibition and other one is protein synthesis of, it is inhibit the 13S and 15S portion of RNA. And the rest of them are like inhibition of DNA-dependent polymerase, then cell membrane disruption, and some folate synthesis factors like penicillinase synthesis factors. So then RNase inhibitory factors. So these are the mode of action of the antibiotic, that is sulfonamides, tetracyclines, beta-lactamines, quinolines, rifampicin, etc. So when it comes to the resistance, penicillinase is getting resistant to the cleavage of beta-lactamase ring, then aminoglycosis by phosphorylation, chloramphenicol by modification by acetylation, erythromycin by methylation of RNA, and tetracycline reduce uptake by efflux mechanism, and sulfonamides by activity of some enzymes. So as it was mentioned in the previous speech also, it was said that it was some of the microorganisms which is in bond resistance. Like you can see omnipotently, we can see such kind of that is natural mechanism, resistant mechanism, which is in the body of the bacteria. But it's not the case of achieve resistance. That is, we are taking care of more, that is the mutation which is caused in the bacteria, acquired resistance due to the presence of certain thrust areas of resistance, especially by plasmids. So when you look at the antibiotic resistance, natural resistance, that is organism it's itself having some natural resistance, and there are some acquired resistance like genetic methods and biochemical methods of genetics. Acquired genetics is like chromosomal methods of genetics is like mutation is one of the major event evolving in the resistant mechanism. And another thing is the resistant plasmid, that is extra chromosomal plasmid, which is present in the body. The biochemical factors like production of enzymes, modification of targets, and alternative pathways and foreign sensing are the major acquired resistance which is given by against the antibiotic by the bacteria. So this is this picture depicts that how it is the antibiotics infect the ribosomes, inactivation of certain phosphate group of the target, then how the efflux mechanism is pumping out the increase in the active flux of the drug, modification of drug target, and reduction of permeability. So that no longer the cell, the permeability is reduced, means no longer the drug is getting into the body. So this is the mechanism. Permeability is, I mean, it will limit the permeability of getting the antibiotic into the body, and inhibition of metabolic compounds like enzymes, so that the multiplication or a DNA synthesis or DNA amplification limits, and also inhibit the blockage of synthesis of ribosome, 70S ribosomes are getting inhibited, so that the DNA replication is taking place, and blockage of transcription and inhibition of folate synthesis. So these are the mechanisms where the antibiotics generally work on, so that the antibiotic, the organism gets killed off. So when it comes to this is the target where the cell wall synthesis. So how it was, the target is getting prohibited by efflux mechanisms. So there are some efflux mechanisms so that the antibodies is not getting inside. Then there are some other bypass of immunity like a tetracycline and a sulfonamides compound. They will change the target so that the ribosome binding will be hindered. Then target modifications of DNA replication, as well as again the protein synthesis is also taken place by rifampicin, vancomycin, and penicillins. Then some degradation of certain enzymes, which is helpful for the transport of these antibiotics into the system of bacteria is getting hindered. As we know, like it's an intrinsic mechanism, there is a target, there was no cell wall, so that easily the uptake of bacteria, drug is not possible. Then innate influx mechanism, where the drug is getting blocked and the exporting of drug into the bacteria is getting limited. Then cephalosporinase, which is produced by the Klebsiella, it inactivate. Whenever the drug is getting into the body, it is getting degraded by the cephalosporinase. That is when the cephalosporin is getting inside, there is an enzyme called cephalosporinase present in the Klebsiella which degrade this particular enzymes. Next is mutation. We all know like bacterial or DNA mutation is another one of the reason for resistance. So plasmid is another important factor. We call it as R genes. So and this cartoon says that you will be protected if you wear this. This is a plasmid. So this is a scenario where there is our genes are getting into the body of bacteria. So the plasmid is having some resistant genes, antibiotic resistant gene. It carry antibiotic resistant genes which having a multifaceted activity. Like whenever the antibiotic can get into the body, so that it can produce an enzyme which altering the antibiotic, so that the drug target, the activity of the antibiotic that diminishes. Then antibiotic degrade. Whenever the antibody is degraded by certain activity enzyme, which we are seeing in the Klebsiella, the permeability changes. So it won't allow the antibiotic to get into the system. And efflux mechanism, as though it is sometimes it got into the bacteria, but easily can be thrown out by efflux mechanisms. These are some of the mechanism where the antibiotic resistant genes work on. And this antibiotic resistant gene from one organism to other organism. We all know this is a simple basic science which we studied, like conjugation, transduction, and transformation mechanisms by the phage, otherwise like conjugation by means of sex pillars into the plasmid. So, and one more thing is like a transposons. The transporter mediated drug resistance is also being present. And another one factor is the integrons. Integrons are small, having some recognition site, so that the drug resistant genes is associated with the multiple cassets along with the recognition integration site, so that the integrons will go and bind to the next bacteria when it's going from one bacteria to another. So that along with this integron, the drug resistant gene also getting transferred to other bacteria, and it will go and bind to the chromosome of particular next bacteria, and it goes on and on to the as a horizontal gene transfer mechanism. And we also mentioned, apart from the genetic methods, there is a acquired resistances through biochemical methods, like drug accumulation can be prevented by modification of the target, alternate pathways, and producing enzymes. So modification of drug target, inactivation of drug, and active flux of drug are the major mechanism in which the resistance by biochemical methods are taking place. So limiting uptake means of antibiotics, so that the sufficient methods cannot become, so so that this drug uptake will be limited. So this varies from gram-positive bacteria to gram-negative bacteria. So another thing is like it should enter through a pores called porins. So these are the mechanism where the antibiotic is getting into the body through the pores. So look at this picture. See, there's a changes in the channel so that it cannot no longer go and bind. So, and this third picture shows that there is a correct structure for antibiotic to get into the pores. Whereas the first, second, and the third one is, fourth one is not having, cannot be binded by the antibiotic. The porins cannot bind to the antibiotic, so that the antibiotic cannot be get into the organisms. So next is modification of drug target. The multiple components in bacteria cells target the antimicrobial agent, so that they modified by the bacteria and enable to resistant to those drugs. This are the genetic factors. So in this mechanism, like you can see, then influx, antibiotic influx, there is a couple of proteins like a DRAB, OTC, and TLC. So these are a couple of efflux proteins which will help in the intake of antibiotic into the body. So is any changes in this antibiotic efflux mechanism will reverse back the antibiotics which get into the body. Second mechanism is antibiotic degradation, where beta-lactam is ring. This can easily be getting degraded, so that the antibiotics no longer exist for the absorption by the organisms. Then modification of antibiotics. Whenever look at this picture, like this is when antibiotics comes, and it is getting in spike-like structures, so that with the help of certain ASE and APH and proteins, the structure itself is getting changed, so that the antibiotic is no longer active. Next is target bypass. Though the antibiotic will go and bind to the target, but it won't be the structural difference in the target changes. The binding of antibiotic is not in a efficient manner, so that altered target it is very difficult to fit in with the antibiotic. So always, and in a bacteria will have a receptor for the antibiotic, so that when the receptor is getting changed, the bacteria cannot fit into that particular receptor, so that antibiotic cannot be taken into action. Next is the target modification in the case of proteins in the cysteinous and 13S RNA. It cannot be bind to the 16S and the 17S RNA, so that the RNA methylate transferase enzymes will changes the structure of this particular target protein, so that antibiotic cannot be no longer acted on that particular place. Then sequestration, like there's a seriously sequestrated the changes in the series changes on the drug target, that is antibiotics is taking place, so that antibiotics is no longer getting. And these are the different mechanism in which the target modification as well as the antibiotic degradation, etc., is taking into place. So resistance by ribosomal protein mutation, methicillin binding, mutation in DNA-dependent RNA polymerase. These are the major mechanism in which the resistance taking place by Streptococcus pneumonia and tuberculosis. There are certain genes, like in case of penicillin binding protein, there is a change in the penicillin binding proteins by Staphylococcus aureus by acquisition of a MEK gene. So presence of MEK gene will alter the penicillin binding protein so that the penicillin cannot bind no longer to the onto the bacteria. Then the action of vancomycin is limited by the resistance by strengthening or thickening of the cell wall. This is another action in the cell membrane which is taking place in the case of Staphylococcus aureus. Then there are other genes called MRF gene, VAN genes, changes the structure of peptoglycan so that the antibiotic cannot be bind onto the peptoglycan layer. Then some EMR genes, which does not allow the antibiotics to find the ribosomal, and so that the activity against the ribosome is not taking place. Then there are two other genes like gyrase A and gyrase B. Like we all know how important the topoisomerase in the DNA replications. So the presence of this gyrase A and gene causes the modification of binding with the gyrase protein so that the DNA replication is hindered there. And the mechanism is inactivation of drug by degradation of drug and the transfer of chemical group into the drug. So first thing is it can be either the drug cannot be degraded into pieces. Second thing is that chemical alteration of that particular drug by acetylation, aldehydation. So is the chemical modification of the drug acid, so that the drug won't be no longer a real drug. So it will be mimic the drug, but it's not no longer be a real drug. So this is the degradation of antibiotic so that the drug won't be there for the to bind on the target site. Then enzymes like beta-lactamase enzymes, which is especially produced by the multi-drug resistant organisms like Staphylococcus aureus, gonorrhea, and influenza, that degrade the lactamase enzyme ring. Then chloramphenicol by chloramphenicol acetate transfer. There's an acetyl transfer. Acyl group is getting transferred to the chloramphenicol so that the chloramphenicol is no longer is active. Then inactivation by aminoglycosides by acyl and phosphoacyl transferase enzymes so that the aminoglycosides is getting inactivated. So next, the final mechanism is active efflux drug. As you know, this the efflux mechanism is always required for a bacteria to take out the toxic material which is come to bacteria. But our antibiotic will take advantage of that efflux mechanism. So generally, this is a constitutive expression of this efflux. But when this antibiotics is resistance is occur, that time the overexpression of this constitutive efflux mechanism is taking place. So that high level of efflux mechanism is taking place. Especially this is happening in the multi-drug resistant organism where always the efflux mechanism is in the high level. So whatever the microorganism, whatever the antibody is getting into the whole system of bacteria is getting effluxed out. As and when it is getting out. So that is an immediate efflux mechanism is taking place so that the antibodies no longer stay into the microbe body. There are 5 different families of protein which work on this, that is called the ABC family, MATE, that is antibody binding cassette family, multi-drug toxic compound exclusion MATE family, small multi-drug resistant SMR family, major facilitator superfamily, MFS family, and resistant nodulation family. These are the family of protein which is work together for the efflux mechanism so that the antibiotics will no longer stay into the body. So these are the efflux mechanism genes which is acting on ATP, APC cascade, MFS, SMR, RND, and MATE mechanisms. So another one mechanism is quarantine. As we all know, that what is quarantine? Like there are autoinducers produced by the organisms to as a signaling mechanism, so that more species of organisms comes together and they are act together for a particular cause, which like conjugation, apoptosis, morbidity, whatever may be the metabolic activities of microorganisms or reproductive activities of microorganisms. For the particular cause of gene expressions, they work together by the help of AHL, or we all know the AHL autoinducers, and similarly, a lot of autoinducers are there. So the sender by the cells, AHL, and receiver gets the transcript, so that both organisms comes together and sensing can be takes place. The organic can work together. But in the case of QS-mediated antibody resistance, because it's very when it is two things are there, because when it is comes to QS means multi-layer organisms are acting together. As I said in the case of pathobiome. So here this we said the multi-layered organism works together. Here also same thing. This is another pathobiome in the case of current sensing. Where the adaptive resistance is taking place by the current sensing induced genes, so that the biofilm is getting formed, so that the antibiotics is no longer much more effectively won't activate into the system of microorganisms. It won't get perlocated into the system of microorganisms. Another one scenario is elevated mutations, like overprotection of target. So here the mimicking the target, it won't be the real target. It will expose, the antibiotic is getting exposed to a unreal target, so that it will mistaken it as a real target, and what the antibiotic cannot be activated because it is not a real receptor. Next is some factor will bind onto the receptor factor, so that antibiotic cannot no longer fit onto the surface. This is the scenario of that. Next is drug modification. Sometimes the drug is getting modified so that the receptor cannot bind, identify the drug, so that it will not fit onto the drug. Then degradation of drug. Then target mutation. The target is getting mutated so that it cannot no longer fit. The target is getting modified. So many mechanism, and another factor is efflux, which has happened in previously, like in normal bacteria, even in the quarantine sensing bacteria also, it's a efflux mechanisms take place. So it is a cumulative aspects of metabolic genes or multi-regulatory genes take place in the QS-mediated antibiotic resistance. So now we have found how the mechanism of antibiotic action has taken place. Now the prevention action plan is the last point which we are going to look. So of course, indeed, it is a global problem, especially in the case of penicillin-resistant pneumococci, which was in India is much more facing than, like recently metallo-resistant bacteria is reported from New Delhi also. So it is alarmingly high situations. So IMR challenge is taking place in many countries, and commitments are even India is also a part of that. But the global impact of antimicrobial resistance, as I said, 750,000 to millions people are dying. But the national action plan is very limited in limited country. Around 30% of developing countries are only take part in this national action plan. Rest of the countries are left behind. And as we know, we all already predicted that it's a loss of around $100 trillion is going to be spent. But another fact is the expected death rate of newborns, it is going to be 58,000. And TB, it is going to be increasingly, that is 450,000 per year due to the multi-drug resistant TBs. And another factor is travelers from, this is not only the enemy, the human beings alone. So whenever the human beings are infected, it is affecting the entire system wherever he works on, even if it is the pond ecosystems and the animals which he is associated. So it is a cumulative effect which is spreading on and on towards the people as well as the animals together. So, but really the WHO is on to it. The role of WHO is a great, where the recognize the need for improved coordinated global effort to contain the AMR. So they develop 5 strategies to improve awareness. That's what we are here today, to enhance the awareness and understanding about the AMR, and strengthen the knowledge through the surveillance and research, reduce infections, optimize the use of antimicrobial medicines and develop more R&Ds and focus more research on the control measures or alternative measures to AMR. So we are talking about today, we are talking about the global scenario. Let us not forget our own country, how we stand, where we stand. So we need to have a lot of lack of community awareness, especially in the farm animals. Now we are talking about the especially resistance for fishes. So lack of community awareness among the farmers is very important things to be noted. So that creation of awareness among the farmers is very important. Then availability over the counter needs policymakers has to be limit the awareness. Availability of the over-counter medicines, as well as the monitoring agency has to be implemented. And why I'm talking about the Staphylococcus pneumonia in this context, because the COVID-19 has paralyzed the paramount amount of antibiotic resistance has been reached in the case of respiratory pneumonia causing antimicrobial resistance. So the pneumonia causing organisms are getting high, that is antimicrobial resistance are increasing after the COVID scenario. So it has to be taken into account, especially in Indian scenario. So there are some antimicrobial resistance surveillance network is going on. We call it the SNARS network. In South India, we have only one. It is in the CMMCHS Coimbatore. Rest of in Bhopal, Kolkata, and Guntur, and even Andhra Pradesh one is there. So majority of here it is one is in Trivandrum, also GMS in Trivandrum. So Tiruchirappalli, Indore, Shimla, there are few sites where the surveillance network is going on. This is only in the case of, I feel it is only for the human point of view, but it is in the health point of view. I think it has to be emancipated in terms of the agriculture as well as in the environmental point of view. So we all know about noodle metallo-resistant lactamase bacteria. I just wanted to mention that since we are in the Indian scenario, so I just wanted to mention that. So AMR is a complex phenomenon which need to tackle about in a multifaceted manner. It's a collaborative approach manner. So in order to have a collaborative approach manner, we need to combat antimicrobial resistance. We should have a strategies to increase collaboration, rational drug use, infection control and prevention, antimicrobial resistance, ban on over-to-counter antibiotics, education and motivation, that is very important. R&D it has to be extended. The extended activities in the R&D has to be done. Then immunization coverage has to be given. Hand hygiene practices has to be enhanced. Then standard treatment guidelines. The new MR programs has to be conducted. AMR committee it's there in Kerala. In India, but I'm talking in general. National policy is also implemented in India. And essential drug trial. What are the essential drug list and which are the non-essential drug? What is a fake drug? That list has to be kept aware about within the practitioners. And we are not prevention. Diagnostic tool is for the screening surveillance diagnostic tool is very matters. Then new attention to the development of new antibiotics is another important criteria to be taken. Vaccination is prevention is better than cure. So the vaccines are much more effective than the antibiotics. Then surveillance program, as we know, coordinated response is very important. So global function is mainly implementation of for the implementation of every national action plan. There should be under them 3-4 major umbrellas like prevention, data generation, awareness, and access and conservation. So we are here in this area like awareness campaign among the school children, among the college students, from the grassroots level, and the farmers has to be continuously it has to be done. And water sanitization and vaccination program has to be enhanced. Data generation. So and based on the surveillance program, how much resistance is there, how much is reduced, how much we are able to manage, all this data has to be generated. So this needs to be, I want the slides to be, because there are the antibody production is decline in the antibody production is taking place after 2000, because after 20 years, there's not much prospects has been taken place in the antibody production, and we don't know, like this is maybe because of the enhancement of this antibiotic in resistance have limit the industrial production as well as industrial selling of this antibiotics. So that could be the one of the reasons. So the profit which is come out of the antibiotics may be reduced due to the antibiotic resistance. Could be that is one of the reasons where the industries is limiting to generate new antibiotic productions. So we need to have look on this antibiotic alternative therapy, of course, phage therapy, but it has got its own limitations. Then lytic enzymes in mucus and saliva. Then topoisomerases is another area of which can be looked into. Then antimicrobial peptides. This is one of the hottest area where we are people are working on to. Of course, WHO also has some initiative like a World Antimicrobial Awareness Week. Then GLASS, that is Global Antimicrobial Resistance Surveillance System, and the Global Antibiotic Research and Development Partnership and the Interagency Coordination Group of Antimicrobial Resistance. These are the WHO initiatives, so it has to be strengthened. So policymakers, as I said, the over-counter prescription of medicines has to be limited, and implementation of infection prevention control measures also be looked into matter by the policymakers. And regarding the agricultural, the vaccination and need of antibiotic uses alternative to antibodies when it's available. So vaccination is much more important than the antibiotic prevention, I mean, giving antibiotics once the infection has come. So the veterinarians as well as aquaculture people as well as the vaccines has to be developed, or prevention to be taken better than after, I mean, giving the antibiotics. That is the only thing. The farm animals can be through improved qualities or resistant varieties can be improved. Global action like strengthen the surveillance, reduce the incidence of infection, optimize the use of antibiotic medicines, and investment in countering antimicrobial resistance. That is like any other alternative strategies in the R&D can be invested and develop alternative strategy against antimicrobials. So education of this policy is very, and the education system with the antimicrobial awareness is very important. Then we should also have a surveillance system for, especially for MRSA and ESBL producers, antibiotic resistant organisms, beta lactamase as well as medicine resistant bacteria. Though this surveillance programs to be strengthened, as well as opportunistic outbreaks has to be prevented. And like infographics, website, videos, press releases, presentation, etc. has to be produced. I mean, it has to be strengthened. It has to be we have to give more and more awareness through this materials like activity plans, action plans, social media, etc. Then AMR surveillance in food chain is very important. As I show the how the food chain is getting in land as well as water, how the food chain is affecting. So the AMR surveillance in the food chain is also very important. Now the WHO has given some priority in the R&D sections, like which all the medicines to be adequately, or I mean most importantly or urgently needed. Like there are priority like critical 1, 2, and 3. So Acinetobacter, Pseudomonas aeruginosa, and Enterobacteriaceae, there's all carbamine resistant organisms. So address to be given in such cases so that antimicrobes to be developed against those organisms. And second priority is Enterococcus, Staphylococcus aureus, Helicobacter pylori, Campylobacter, and Salmonella and Neisseria gonorrhea, where is also the second priority for WHO, and the third priority is Streptococcus, Haemophilus influenza, and Shigella species. So those are the penicillin and ampicillin resistance. So Enterococcus in the second priority is vancomycin, clarithromycin, and fluoroquinone. So these are the areas is now WHO is focusing on the urgent need of new medicines against MDR positive organisms. Let me conclude this topic of today by having some remarks on AMR has evolved into the world major threat, as we all know. So global concerned action is a cumulative action plan is needed. AMR global action plan provides a technical blueprint. Multi-sectoral national action plans are needed, and sustainable implementation is a major challenge. Global investment is especially needed, especially in this direction, to develop new varieties or new drugs. Global monitoring should be assessed progress in tackling AMR, so the global screening or surveillance program is to be strengthened. Thank you. There are 2 points: right drug for right bug and right dose at right time. Thank you all for your patient listening.
Thank you, Dr. Ganga, for a nice talk, and it was really in the line of AMR awareness. And so you have covered starting from the basic steps like what are antibiotics, how resistance is developed, what is the mechanism of resistance, and how to tackle the resistance. All the things very nicely you have covered. I'm sure this will be very useful for college students if they have joined our program. So now I hand over the year to Dr. P.K. Patil, Principal Scientist. So if any interaction section, and otherwise vote of thanks.
Okay, sir, I'm audible?
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Otto. And I profusely thank Dr. Ganga. She has made a nice presentation, and it was very, I think you can remove the presentation. And this is a very good presentation because we are having antibiotic awareness week and coinciding with our 75 years of Indian independence program. And I thank Dr. Ganga for sparing her valuable time and giving us this information. It looks like, based on the presentation, it itself looks like she's a very good teacher, though it went beyond its speculated time. It was not boring and highly informative, and I thank her for this. And I thank Dr. K.P. Jitendran, the director of SIBA, who has wholeheartedly supported this program from the beginning, and he is continuously participated in this program in spite of his busy schedule, because currently has a meeting going on. And I thank our senior principal, Dr. Purnima, who was given a welcome address and other things. And I thank basically, last but not the least, I thank all the students and the participants of this program, students of SIBA and students of the Ayappa College and other colleagues. I know through our aquaculture network, we have aquaculture professionals who are working in different areas also joined this program. And it was live available in YouTube. And this program will be available after this meeting also. And many of our programs we have seen. And and because of these several parallel meetings, this type of things will be happening. Some people missed the attend this program in the live, and these live videos will be available in the YouTube, and they will be downloaded and they will be viewed for several days to come also. So this information will be captured, will be available for students and the researchers to be used in future also. And I thank especially I thank Dr. Ota, who has taken a keen interest and is a specialist in our AMR program in the institute. And under the ICR program, he is running a national network project on antimicrobial resistance, along with all other ICR institute and the medical institutes under the One Health program of WHO. And I thank him for wholeheartedly conducting this program. This is one of the program of the 1 week antimicrobial resistance awareness week. We had essay writing program, we had drawing, and we have elocution. And tomorrow we will be having a closing ceremony, and the prize distribution also will be there. So I thank Ota for arranging such a nice program. And overall, thank you everybody. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Thank you, sir.
Okay, so thank you all.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, madam. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, madam.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Bye.
So shall I leave?
Yeah. Bye. Thank you very much.